Welcome, friends, those who are here with us in Ecumenical Centre, the Visitor Hall in Geneva, and those who are joining us online around the world. It is great to be with you and share with you the launch of this new important text, The Future of Mission Cooperation, which the Commission for World Mission and Evangelism has been working with colleagues all around the world to produce. And today we are going to launch it. My name is Peter Cruchley, and I'm the new director of the Commission for World Mission and Evangelism. It's a delight to be with you. Our apologies for those of you, we were having some technical difficulties. My thanks to our colleagues in comms who managed to keep it all together and gather us back here in this way. Friends, our General Secretary had wished to be with us today, but is unable because he is representing the WCC at the Vatican in meetings with the Pope. And so he has instead sent a message which we are going to show at this point.
Dear sisters and brothers, may the grace, peace, and blessings of our triune God be upon you. Welcome to the launch of the last WCC biology reflecting on the centenary of the International Missionary Council. My thanks to the outgoing director of the Commission on World Mission and Evangelism, the Reverend Dr. Risto Joko, who has edited this text, and to the editorial group also, drawn from different parts of the ecumenical mission movement. You are indeed centering us again in the driving, originating spirit of the ecumenical movement. And you are sending us out through that spirit. We are witnesses to how the mission empowering spirit of God draws us together, converts and commissions us, and sends us Christ transforming disciples, seeking justice, reconciliation, and unity. The book is a product of its title. This is the outcome of a rich and long process that took shape during the time of the COVID lockdown and shows that our cooperation bears fruit, especially in times of challenge and crisis. The book, and especially the contributors, are a timely reminder that the WCC and the ecumenical movement are essentially a mission movement. We are born of the desire to offer a common and redemptive witness to a world wounded by war and colonialism. The WCC has lived out this calling during the unfolding crises, rooted in the injustices, inequalities, and idolatries that war and colonialism have spawned and cultivated amongst us. This text invites us to celebrate the spirit of unity that has been bearing fruit amongst us and incites us to give our work afresh to the Spirit's transforming power. We are facing multiple interconnected crises whose roots lie in systems we can only overthrow and transform if we act together in the Spirit's power, responding to the call that Christ places on us to repent, repair, and redeem. There are voices in this book who speak from those struggles, who call us to attend to what God is doing in all our locations, and who sends us together afresh in the gospel's power of liberation and love. I am grateful for the book and the communities behind it. I challenge us all in the ecumenical movement to go much further in the direction they are pointing. I offer my personal thanks and appreciation to all who have worked on this book. May the labor of your work bear much fruit. Best wishes and blessings.
So friends, on our panel today, we have both a panel that is present, but also available online. And I'll briefly introduce them before we turn to explore some of the themes in this book. So we have with us the Reverend Dr. Risto Joko, who is on screen. He's the former director of CWME, and as Jerry mentioned, has been one of the main architects of this text with our colleagues here. He's now the director of the Office for Global Mission with the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Finland. We have Dr. Marina Nursangzeli Bahara, who is a missiologist from the Oxford Centre for Mission Studies and is originally from Mizoram in Northeast India and is joining us today. Also, the Reverend Dr. Winnell Curtin Roberts, originally from Barbados, is a mission historian, a theological educator, and pastor here in Geneva with the Moravian Church. Reverend Dr. Kuzipa Nawamba is here with us. She is the WCC's Program Director for Unity and Mission, joins us originally from Zambia. And then finally, Reverend Dr. Michael Beale, who is with us here, is a staff with the EMW and connected to the Hamburg University in Germany. And then Professor Ken Ross, who is maybe lost in the wider audience online, also is with us, an ecumenical missiologist, long-standing connected with the life of CWME from the Church of Scotland and based in Malawi. Friends, our plan is to explore different aspects of our text, just to share with you some of its interest and weight and wonder. And we hope to have a short time, if possible, for further engagement, question and answer. But Risto, thank you so much for being patient in the technical difficulties. We were particularly keen to keep you because Risto is going to give us a kind of brief introduction to what the text has grown out of, the process and the intentions that were behind it. So Risto, over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Dear colleagues and friends, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. The book that we are launching today has a truly significant title, The Future of Mission Cooperation, The Living Legacy of the International Missionary Council. It looks like this. I hope you can see the cover, I mean. This volume is the fruition of an 18-month study process related to the centennial of the International Missionary Council, IMC, that was first set up at Lake Mohonk, USA in 1921. Many of you now following this book launch are aware that the book has an earlier sister volume entitled 100 Years of Mission Cooperation, the Impact of the International Missionary Council 1921-2021. This one, and it was launched last year in September 2022 at the World Catholic Churches Assembly in Karlsruhe, Germany. The 18-month study process that I mentioned was inspired by some very significant and even groundbreaking developments related to the Protestant mission movement at the start of the 20th century. First, the World Missionary Conference in Edinburgh 1910 was an extraordinary and historic event, not only within and in support of the ecumenical movement of mission and unity, but also in the formation of what was to become global Christianity. And secondly, as an outcome of the Edinburgh 1910 conference, there was the foundation of the IMC, International Missionary Council at Lake Mohonk in 1921, 101 years ago. Throughout its official existence lasting some 40 years, the IMC played a unique role in the formation of the ecumenical movement and world mission. In fact, it has been said that until the founding of the World Council of Churches in 1948, the IMC functioned as the de facto representative of the ecumenical movement. And even after the establishment in 1948 of the two global ecumenical bodies in association, as it was agreed that the IMC should continue with its own activity in the field. It wasn't until 1961 at the Third Assembly of the WCC New Delhi, India, that the IMC was integrated into the structures of the World Council of Churches, becoming the WCC Commission on World Mission and Evangelism, CWME. When the year 2021 and the centenary of the IMC were approaching, the WCC Commission on World Mission and Evangelism wanted to honor the IMC legacy of fostering mission cooperation and unity and celebrate the Jubilee year by means of a global and ecumenical study process that would engage some 15 study centers of study groups around the world to reflect on the impact of the IMC and the CWME in their respective regions. The steering committee of the IMC centenary study process, which I was privileged to lead, hoped to establish at least one study center in each of the 8 regions of the WCC. And if we can regard Aotearoa, New Zealand, as belonging to the Pacific region and not to Asia, we have indeed succeeded in our efforts. With its theme of Christ's love moves the world to reconciliation and unity, the 11th Assembly of the WCC in Karlsruhe, Germany, affirmed the ongoing pilgrimage of justice, reconciliation, and unity. All of these deep dimensions are included in the mission pilgrimage of world mission. In the production of this book, a global IMC centenary study process has been conducted in the manner that both the IMC and later the CWME have followed, that is, by fostering reconciliation, unity, and mission cooperation. Theologians and practitioners of various institutions and mission actors have decided to cooperate and create unity locally, and in some cases regionally and even nationally. Not all of the regional study groups or study centers were already in existence. Denominationally, these study groups have often extended beyond the member churches of the WCC. And in addition, in the course of the study process, the steering committee nominated by the CWME was pleased to note how mission creates visible unity and practical cooperation. It is now time to describe the contents of the volume. It is divided into two parts. Following on from the introduction by the steering committee member, Reverend Dr. Michael Beale, whom you can see there back behind the table. The first part provides 9 regional reports produced by the study centers or study groups during the second phase of the worldwide study process. The idea was that the study centers would concentrate on the present and future of mission in their regions and produce a reflective report from this perspective. And you can understand the name of the volume from that perspective. As you will discover if you read some or all of the 9 reports in the book, the 9 study centers have chosen different approaches and reporting styles, even if the shared target was to describe the current situation and reflect on the present and the future of mission in their respective regions. The reports paint a vivid picture of choice and challenges facing churches and mission actors in today's world, and more specifically in China, India, Kenya, South Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Central and Eastern Europe, and Germany. In the course of the study process, the steering committee discovered how difficult it was to try to limit mission solely in geographical or regional terms. Mission is also happening through, for instance, networks, and even virtually. So we decided to take an ecumenical look at some of the transnational mission networks, the end result being that the second part of the book contains 5 studies of transnational mission networks. They also bring to light a number of theological and missiological issues and developments that may not have been so familiar to the academic establishment. Mission has contributed significantly to a growing movement of new Christian churches in the world, especially in the 20th century, what scholars call world Christianity or global Christianity. This could not have happened in such a short time without mission. The first text of these transnational mission networks deals with the Council for World Mission, which was established in 1977. This has been the historical successor of the London Missionary Society, originally founded in 1795, and provides a clear overview of how mission cooperation has been uniting churches and mission agencies. The second text in the second part of the book, chapter 11, by the way, is concerned with the similar development of the concept of mission, but in the French-speaking Protestant world, which resulted in the Society of Evangelical Mission of Paris, established in 1822, becoming the Evangelical Community of Apostolic Action in 1971, nowadays known as the Community of Churches in Mission, or CEVA, the abbreviation. The third text on transnational mission networks in the volume describes a more recent endeavor. The Oxford Centre for Mission Studies, established in 1983, which has been attempting to create a third space between the so-called evangelicals and ecumenicals, itself attempting to be open to both of these movements in Christianity. Then the role played by transnational networks is described in chapter 13 from a Kenyan and African perspective. The following chapter informs readers that the Roman Catholic Church has its own central office for mission actors, the Service of Documentation and Study of Global Mission, SEDOS, which is based in Rome. The article describes and reflects on its role and also its relation to the CWME/WCC. And the concluding chapter of the book by Kenneth Ross, who is also with us today, he's another steering committee member of the study process, provides a clear idea of how mission is perceived through the living experience of the churches and mission actors in world Christianity today. I think that nobody who reads through the reports and the text describing these mission networks can avoid gaining a clear impression of how diverse and multifaceted mission has become in the world during the 10 decades that the ecumenical mission movement has existed in the form of the IMC/CWME. On the basis of the regional reports and the text concerned with the transnational mission networks, the book is likely to motivate and inspire further missiological exploration. The steering committee of the IMC Centenary Study process also debt of gratitude to all those who have participated and contributed to the study process related to the IMC Centenary. We are conscious of the fact that the celebration, including this moment of the book launch, consists of a modest attempt to understand and concretize the prayer uttered by Jesus, quote, that all of them may be one Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us so that the world may believe that you have sent me. John chapter 17, verse 21. Thank you for your attention.
Risto, thank you so much for this overview and succinct sharing for the text and where it's come from. We're turning to one of the editorial group from the IMC Centennial process, Dr. Marina, to share with us her take on some of the important issues emerging in this text and how it kind of challenges ecumenical missiology and the mission movement. So, Marina, thank you.
Thank you. The study process for me has been a fascinating journey from the moment it was being conceptualized and developed, and while working together with the different study centers who had responded positively to our invitation to collaborate in the study process up till this moment when we are launching the 3rd volume of the International Missionary Council, or the IMC Centenary volumes, with reports from the study centers on the 2nd phase of the study process and also some additional individual papers. We're still continuing the work of putting together the collection of individual study papers from the different study centers in a series of volumes, which we hope to complete within this year. It is indeed a great moment to launch this book today, and an occasion to thank the study centers and the authors who have contributed to this volume, to thank the editor, Risto Joko, for his work, and the World Council of Churches, WCC, for publishing this book. Before highlighting some issues and points, let us be reminded that right from the beginning, the study process was meant to set the development of the activities of the IMC within a global framework where and how cooperation and collaboration in mission took place. This is the 3rd volume in the series of the 3-volume, which traces the history of the IMC and its continuation in the CWME. The centers had been asked to bring in their perspectives by studying what took place in their region and if and how movements and developments there were related to the members and the activities of the IMC. We focus particularly at regions and actors who had been either deliberately marginalized and left out, like the Latin America, or regions which were outside the focus of the IMC members, like the movements in Eastern Africa or in the northeast of India. In our understanding, this approach is a shift in perspectives, which is threefold. First of all, it is a shift which occurs by bringing in various voices from the different regions who bring in their insights, which you will find in this collection. Secondly, it is a shift of decentering the focus from the IMC as an organization to movements and actors in the various regions. Thirdly, it is a shift by looking beyond the constituency of the WCC-CWME. This shift in perspective are a starting point for decolonizing approaches by those whose history has been fought by the experience of colonialism. This is reflected explicitly in several reports like those from India, Africa, and Latin America. The report from Costa Rica reminds us, however, that there is no vantage point from outside of coloniality from which to work for decolonization. I would like to emphasize that a similar intention like decolonization is discussed in some of the reports under the heading of Mission from the Margins. This picks up the well-known passage in Together Towards Life, where it is said that those at the margins often have the epistemological privilege of knowing exclusionary rules and practices. People on the margins, living in vulnerable positions, often know what exclusionary forces are threatening their survival and can best discern the urgency of their struggles. People in positions of privilege have much to learn from the daily struggles of people living in marginal conditions through struggle in and for life. Marginalized people are reservoirs of the active hope, collective resistance, and perseverance that are needed to remain faithful to the promised reign of God. This we see in TTL 38 to 39, the point. The reports from the study centers resonate with this perspective and provide ample evidence of this. They underline that God's Spirit was and continues to be active in all corners of his creation, also in the midst of those who experience being pushed to the margins. This relates to the question on how to contextualize the gospel so that it speaks to all and empowers them, a task which will never end, as particularly the report from China highlights. To browse through the reports and study the passages on contextualization and mission from the margins will bring additional and differing insights into the decolonizing debate. Nowadays, the CWME, as the successor of the IMC, is a commission mainly reflecting on mission. It has been mentioned that we included reports of the history and activities of other movements cooperating in mission. And in order to perpetuate the discussion on cooperation in mission, we decided to integrate papers on trans-regional and transnational networks, which are organizing cooperation in mission or coordinates activities. Some of them existed alongside the period of the IMC, and others were founded after the integration of the IMC and WCC, like the CWM and SEVA. I found the paper on Orthodox mission movements particularly enlightening because it tells a story which is not very well known. The first part of this volume consists of the reports from the study centers on the second phase of the study process, which was on contemporary issues and topics in mission. In the second volume, the Jubilee volume, we had asked for papers on contemporary topics and issues of mission. Looking from this perspective, I find in the report in this volume that some of the topics dealt with are those that have been present and prevalent in mission from the time the IMC was founded. Race and racism are one of these topics. The IMC had a commission working on it, but in each period, it raises its ugly head, and we need to engage with it, as we see in the reports. This is most visible in the reports on race, racism, and whiteness from South Africa. Another such topic is interfaith relations and the attitude towards other religions. Particularly the Indian and the Middle East reports demonstrate that there is a strong continuity of this topic in mission practice and reflection in multi-religious contexts. Over the decades, there has been some topics that emerge which mark mission today. One of this is urbanization as a more recent context, which has been highlighted in the reports from China, Kenya, the Middle East, and Germany, and even in the CWM report. It is a reality that today, more than half of the world's population lives in cities or even megacities. 7 out of the 10 of the biggest megacities are in the global south. Climate issues and ecological concerns definitely are today high on the agenda. In the WCC General Assembly in Karlsruhe in Germany last year, this was probably the topic which was most prominent after or next to peace and reconciliation. It is a concern for mission, and it is a very good point for cooperation, as some of the reports would show. One observation is that even though the study process was mainly possible through the enhanced use of digital media The digital space as a field for mission is mentioned only in 2 reports, the Middle East and Eastern European Center and the Kenyan Center. This probably will become one of the questions of the future, and we will need to engage more with this. One of the interesting aspects which comes out clearly from the report is that all these issues which the churches address in their mission are to be found outside of the churches as trends or even mega trends, which impact on their societies. However, the churches and their members are also marked by them, and they have to cope with them as well within the church. The reports witness to the fact that there are relationships among churches which breathe the spirit of colonialism and dependence, of exclusivist practices which push certain groups, communities, or whole churches to the margins. Many churches are tainted by racism and social inequality. Mission is not only about bringing the gospel to people or working for justice and reconciliation or about diaconia. It is about the willingness and capacity of churches as well for metanoia and a self-critical transformation. When it comes to cooperation, I found Kenneth Rose's observation in the wake of Dana Roberts' lecture striking, and he writes, quote, "More than its founding members could ever have guessed, it turned out to be the bringer of what we know today as world Christianity, a faith no longer identified with any one region or culture, but finding expression in every part of the globe. It was the historic task of the IMC to navigate a journey from a west to the rest, understanding of mission to one of from everywhere to everyone," close quote. It is also distinguished by its realization that when we are called to mission, we are necessarily brought into a dynamic relationship with others who share the same calling, regardless of how different they might be from ourselves. This nicely sums up the context of the study centers and to what their cooperation is as a living witness. Let me conclude with another observation. Edinburgh 1910 was emphasizing that a science of mission is needed in order to proceed and open up the world for mission in the 20th century. The study process was meant to be a process of academic centers in 2 phases. In the first phase, particularly, the research was done in the study centers and brought to light new insights. And turning towards the presence, the validity of this approach is still evident if you browse through the reports and the studies on trans-regional movements in mission. However, looking at the topics which I highlighted and many others which you will find in the volume, it is obvious that those who reflect on mission today are involved in it, not the least by reflecting and contributing their reflection to the practice and spiritual life in Christ. Thank you.
Marina, thank you so much. This flavor of the text you're giving us is already, spurring lots of issues and thoughts certainly in my mind. So thank you for this. We thought within the launch today, we would also ask a reader to come and offer a response. In addition to the intentions of the editorial team, we've been reminded in literary studies that the author is dead. So Michael and Marina, you and Risto, you can all leave. So we need, however, a reader. And Winell, you were so kind to respond positively and to engage and take your reflections into our text and into the title and these themes of decolonization and further. So Winell, thank you. Over to you.
And thank you very much, Peter, for this invitation. And thank you for the opportunity to share here. Yes, I have read the book from cover to cover, and it was quite a refreshing book. To the wide spectrum of those engaged in the practice and study of Christian missions, this book offers contemporary insights into the broad and complex landscape of global Christianity, with attention given to migration, nationalism, populism, racism, poverty, and urbanization, the analytical studies purpose to identify challenges to and to present ideas for future consideration to mission cooperation. In the first slide, I outline the general things I found in the book. Thought that it was comprehensive. The first slide, back to the first slide. Comprehensive, cohesive, well-written, easy to read. I read it on a train. Explorative. There was a diversity in writings and also a diversity in context, which I believe is one of the main strengths of the book. While any centennial celebration is marked by transformations, the global shifts from the founding of the IMC in 1910 to today, as revealed from the various studies, are correctly deemed seismic. In the journey towards the decolonization of mission, the reports from the regional theological institutions and study centers brought into focus what I consider to be intriguing juxtapositions, and I've listed those. On the screen, you will see, first of all, in reading on the study coming out from China, the juxtaposition I found was the question of abolition versus fulfillment of certain spiritual and cultural traditions in China. Out of India, when I read that study, what I found was the tension, the continued tension between the work of nation building, which was quite social, and forced conversion in a pluralistic context. Now, while the St. Paul's University study acknowledges the explosive growth of Christianity in Africa, it also outlined what was competitiveness found in the growing Pentecostal movements as compared with the cooperation hoped for in ecumenism. On the other hand, in South Africa, the Pretoria report raises a new dimension on apartheid and its history, which yet has impactful aftershocks. And they use the emotive and provocative language of whiteness, which could be lost in the narrative of racism. Then we move to the Middle East. In the study coming from Lebanon, it highlights the inherent gifts of the diaconia and hospitality, and addresses the issue of the whiteness of monasticism in relation to the red witness of martyrdom. So the white witness of monasticism as means of mission cooperation. In Latin America and the Caribbean, and let me also say here, I must emphasize it was Spanish-speaking Caribbean. Of course, we can't cover every region, but it was very specific as the Spanish-speaking Caribbean. The review which mapped the mission cooperation, it points to the financial dependency on one hand, which hardly facilitates the need for accompaniment in the partnership to do mission. And then compounded by the divisive nature of the Ukrainian war, the Central and Eastern European report reflects the concerning trend in which believers are the liturgized rather than the evangelized. Now, it was from the German study group, the one which was quite pertinent to me, that one grappled with the reality of Christianity being a minority group, albeit with continued influence, and hence the important reflection on the one hand of religious education for experts only versus religious education for everyone and every level of the society. Similarly, one finds operational juxtapositions in the management in the transnational mission networks. And herein the move towards decolonization is tested, in my opinion. The Council for World Mission is challenged by, on the one hand, next slide, just principles of partnership versus dispensing of power by the privileged few. The community of churches in mission is called to reckon with the ideology of, on the one hand, the beggar to be helped, on the other, mutual respect. Through the Oxford Center for Mission Studies, the differences in approaches between evangelism only and justice only continue to be fleshed out. And the Orthodox Christian Mission Center bears witness to the advantage of hands-on help versus help from afar. Now, against my own backdrop as a Caribbean mission historian and a pastor working in a German-based church in Geneva, there are some considerations critical in the journey towards decolonization, in my view. And I've mentioned two. First, global dialogue spaces. The next slide. Now, the call for consistent truth-telling conversations has specifically been advocated in South Africa. It is my view that this is a tool that ought to be expanded and enhanced in all global spaces. For those who have experienced colonialism and systems of oppression and who are shapers of their own destiny, there ought to be opportunities to self-affirm and self-critique, notwithstanding the necessity of historical and traditional interventions of mission entities who may make periodic visits or who use resources on the grounds for evaluations and for reports. It is my view that a consistent space is to be created so that all factions ought to speak honestly and openly among themselves. In addition, global dialogue are spaces where all the vulnerabilities are to be equally shared. Hitherto, one was led to believe that not only are the mission problems in the South, but the solutions came only from the global North. One must therefore explore the possibilities that when all come in a place of dialogue as both having problems and can give solutions, then we are having cooperation at its highest level. So multi-level global dialogue spaces are integral in future mission cooperation and authentic decolonizing enterprises. And the second thing, protecting power and influence, that unity in mission has never become an important item for Western mission is not surprising, as it's pointed out in chapter 11. Although the older fields of missions have grown towards autonomous leadership and greater self-financing, the reality is that funding of mission work is still supplied through mission agencies. Accountability, as noted in Latin America and the Caribbean, points to this contention. Reports of corruption, incompetence, mismanagement result in the reduction or withdrawal of fundings in places of mission. But I wish to argue that there is less knowledge or critique on how funds are managed in the mission agencies. Can a review of such reports assist with better stewardship and mission cooperation? The phenomenal growth then of Christianity in the global South has resulted in more Sikhs at the intersynodal tables, more academics in theological institutions, and more apologists of the denominational faith outside of the sending countries. One must examine the subtle ways of limiting the input in the setting of the global agendas and the decisions by the mission agency stakeholders. The next just go to the bottom because I know we are pressed for time. And I would say that overall, this book is a valuable resource for this time, and it's valuable because it provides timely, critical conversation for anyone involved in global conversations. Not only does it offer a thoughtful and practical insight, but into the challenges and opportunities facing the mission field today, but it also provides a framework for envisioning a more just and equitable future for all involved in this important ministry. I highly recommend this book to anyone seriously interested in the future of Christian missions.
Thank you so much. Now, this is why we ask a reader to respond to, you can hear what the official propaganda of the writers is all about, but to have a reader then come and share with us some perspectives helps us again see why the text is important. And it's important in the context of particular spaces. But we are here in the visitor hall because this is these are issues that we in the council need to address. And this gift to us from the wider ecumenical mission community is also pressing the ecumenical space to address again what mission is and how we cooperate. It's a rather confident assertion that we cooperate, but we'll come to that again. One of the things that emerged in Assembly, and we are very much reflecting on here in the Secretariat, is this thematic of decolonization. And I appreciate the willingness of my colleagues in the IMC editorial group to allow a particular focus today on decolonization, because I think this is helpful to us in the work that WCC is seeking to shape after the Karlsruhe Assembly. And all of this is a rather elaborate build-up to put Michael on the spot, or Ken Ross, if they are both available. As we take on some of this thematic of decolonization, we will at least have to admit, let's just say, that Europe was rather late to this process back in the critical formation of the ecumenical movement. So I wonder, Michael, perhaps first, and Ken, if you wish also, where does Europe locate itself, especially white European churches with this colonial history? Where do we place ourselves in this further iteration of the decolonial missionary task? So Michael, just putting you on the spot, I know, so any thoughts you can share, please do. And then Ken, I will come to you after that. Michael.
Yeah, thank you for this unexpected question. And before I say a word about that, let me just say one word, what I would like to highlight. You kindly said that a book needs a reader. And I think that's one of the biggest problem of publishing all these books, how to do things with books. So do we get them into the readership and then that they kind of initiate future collaboration and future reflection? And I think I'm highly appreciative that so many people are here who can take the book and take it into their context and make use of it, and then find all the treasures that are hidden in it, and sometimes even those that we have not been able to put into the book, because there are always limits to it. And I think that is in a way already giving a track to a very quick shot to your question. I think one of the things that we need to do is, I think that sometimes we are too strongly in the European churches in our tracks. That's our tradition. These are the people who come to us. And then there is another church where other people from different tradition, different areas in the world come together. And we never somehow get it to the point, that is one of my criticism of my own churches in Germany, that we consider the expression of the others, the migrant churches, the international churches, and other people who are committed to witnessing to Christ in this context as a legitimate expression of Christian faith. So they are the ones who are, the object of diaconical assistance and help. But to think that they are an expression of the multiplicity, of the richness of the Trinity in our context, I think that is one of the challenges that we can directly address. And the other one naturally is always continue with partners in other parts of the world to continue to reflect critically about the history and our involvement and some of the remnants of it in our presence. And I think that is one of the big things that we really have to address. And I'm concluding, I would say that I'm so thankful for the study process, because the last part was actually possible in this exchange, that we could critically interact with each other and have a much broader view than the gospel has brought from the north to the south. That's the story. No, it's much more to say about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, for being put on the spot like that. Ken, you have unmiked. I hope we can arrange the technology. Yes, they will. Please come and share your thoughts. Thank you.
Here I am, Peter. Nice to see you and everyone. I'm possibly going to tell you what you don't want to hear, Peter, but my perspective on Europe is that coloniality is actually reasserting itself at the present time. So, you know, we might like to think the colonial period is something that we're moving away from as history unfolds, but to me, it's like we've started going the other way. And so I think for the ecumenical movement and church life in Europe, it's going to involve quite a prophetic stance. If we take seriously what we're hearing from a volume like this about the need for decolonization in our whole thinking and attitudes and action. So I think one of the things Marina mentioned that might be relevant is that, and it comes out in the volume, is quite a nuanced but close integration between what's happening within the society and what's happening within the church. And I think if this impetus for taking on the challenge of decolonization, if we take it into the church, it's probably going to be a struggle in the church, in Europe in particular. But that can be a struggle with and for the society around the church, and an important part of witness. I think if we look, I know I'm sounding very gloomy and negative probably, but one inspiring thing I believe from the process is that it did try to flip things round. So the IMC, when it formed in 1921, European and American voices dominated the floor, even if there were a few others included. So the study process has sought to reverse that and perhaps put the Europeans and North Americans more in listening mode and lift up the voices. And I think the voices that have come through the study centers have been a fantastic contribution. So perhaps what was eventually found expression in the book might be a model for going forward ecumenically with an agenda for decolonization.
Kenneth, thank you so much. I'm grateful for you naming, I think, what is the lived experience of so many, that Europe has not, you know, given up its colonial ways, or that globally we are somehow living in some decolonial, post-colonial setting. This is an ongoing struggle, and it is helpful then to have named to us quite clearly that we continue to have to live out our faith in this new context of empire's new manifestation in various ways in and how we are. So I welcome that and greet that, and it's important for us because I think in the context of the WCC's particular work, and again, I thank you for allowing us this moment of reflection with you on this theme. There are those who are surprised to hear we are dealing with this again. We thought this had been dealt with. We thought decolonization had taken place, you know, for the most part beyond the Pacific. You know, people are living politically independently of the former European colonial powers, and yet this is coming again to us in different ways. So hearing these responses from our colleagues, I look to the rest of the panel, either Marina or Rinal or Kazipa, whether you want to kind of comment in onto this kind of response and how how then either do we take forward this particular work around decolonization in the mission endeavor we have together, or to address this question, how do European Christians enter this cooperatively for a change? Who would like to comment? We know.
Well, I generally agree that there is that question of the recolonization or colonization reasserting itself. I don't know if it's because I'm an optimist or being hopeful as a pastor Christian, but I'm also seeing some positive signs of reflection. The fact that some communities are now doing research on past histories, I think that is extremely helpful in this whole process, because hitherto there are stories that have been told and narratives from certain perspectives, and now there is the opportunity to hear from the other side. And if that does not impact one generation, it is sure to impact some generation. But there is still a long way to go. Unfortunately, the discussion and the conversations are coming more from outside and outside of the context of the church. And so the church is now forced to have to deal with this, forced to have to deal with the questions of reparations, the question of oppression, the question of apologies that are now national issues across Europe, questions of raising up histories that were once hidden in places that were not considered the colonized countries in Europe. So these are discussions that are very public, and because they're public, even if they don't impact one generation, somehow or the other, I'm hopeful that there is that kind of discussion taking place.
I was going to say something similar as in terms of the global discourse about neocolonialism as such. Is there, and I think I'll pose it as a question, is there a way in which we reinscribe the power relations of the past in the way that we adopt the narrative in which the European countries are the subject, and the previous colonized countries are always at the receiving end? And I ask that question in the light of some nations beginning to assert themselves and to set boundaries around exactly the new neo-colonial incursion. So I think that in our discourses, we need to affirm, the advances that have happened.
Super, thank you. Marina, the OCMS offers itself as a third space. How has this question been preoccupying, engaging your work and space together?
I think I would begin with that we are aware and we recognize that there is colonialism, racism present. We may think that when we look at history that, oh, it was a problem of the past and we have new laws, new regulations that are there to protect us. But does it really protect, and is it really done away with? So we believe that it's not really done away with. There are legislation, rules, regulations, but it doesn't really protect the vulnerables and those who are discriminated and suffering because of this attitude. And coming to the question of what is OCMS doing, so we believe, and the main reason as to why we exist as OCMS is so that we have the students coming in from the Global South. Our priority is serving students from the Global South, where they will be able to access education and also discourses in the Global North. And also not just that they will be able to access, but their voices is also amplified in the Global North, so that there is an engagement, not just through books, but that they come and share their stories, their perspectives, stories in the sense of not just stories, but also in an academic discourse. What is happening in their context, we bring it to the Global North. And we have supervisors who are well-known supervisors who willingly except to supervise our students. They may be an expert in development or migration or, any other topics. But then what we hear often from them is, it is different. We are an expert, but we don't have the experience or the opportunity to access the resources that and experiences that your students have. So in that sense, we're trying to build this dialogue relationship, giving equal access, though I would say that it's still a far cry from it, because our students are still looked upon as the exotic, the real voices. But then again, when you talked about the real voices, the real stories, it's still othering. It's still in a way othering their voices and still considering it as not the normal, but even if it's put in a very positive way, the new knowledge that is now coming forth. It's not as if it's new. Our stories are not new. It's always been there. It just has not been heard. Yeah.
Marina, thank you so much. It's a reminder that empire was never accepted. I mean, the story of Christianity under empire has always been anti-colonial, and many of you are the signs and fruits of that, and so offer the possibility of liberation, salvation, and redemption for the rest of us. So we are certainly grateful for that. Friends, I want us to begin to draw to a close. My apologies, we started a little late, and we have a further process for the study centers engaged in creating this text. So I want to come to the arrow in our quiver and to ask Kazipa to share some final reflections as we wrap up in this launch and to bring us to a final conclusion.
Thank you, Peter. First of all, to just add my voice to thank the authors of this volume. You have lived the legacy of the ecumenical movement at a significant moment. You took the time to self-critique and also to pose questions for going forward, as the title suggests. And I would like to start from where Jerry left off when he gave the introduction. He ended with the words, going further. We need to think about going beyond where the authors of this volume have left us off. And when I was looking through, and like Winnell, I did not read cover to cover, but I did read some parts of the book. And the last chapter, asks the question, what will the next global debate on mission be? And in the presentations, we have heard, where will it be located? What will be its content? And so in responding, I would say, there are a number of things that, the WCC, being at the beginning of a new strategic period, we are asking ourselves, and happily, we are able to put one of the concepts that we are preoccupying ourselves with on the table to benefit from the thinking in this volume and also in this room today. So from what I see in the book, one of the things that is affirmed strongly in chapter 15 is the power of, the platform that is hosting, this event, the power of CWME and its director to convene globally the discourses that could take this work forward. And we are very grateful, that, this is something that, we have the privilege, to have as the WCC. And so the sense of stewardship, that is entailed, by, this role is something that we welcome. The other thing that I saw also in chapter 15 is the connection with theological education of the inputs, of, this work. And various things have been mentioned in the presentations, including, the relationship between practice and reflection. At Arusha, we preoccupied ourselves with the question of discipleship. And so, linking, those ideas, discipleship as reflection, discipleship as reflection, as practice, which entails, being active, in those spaces and holding, the two things in tension is something, that I find we have affirmed. Thirdly, there is reference to the Together Towards Life, which was launched at the Busan Assembly. And in our strategic objectives for the coming period, we have reaffirmed that perhaps TTL has not been unpacked enough. And so when we think about the content of what we are going to preoccupy with ourselves with in terms of understanding where God is already at work, and us being witnesses of what God is doing and finding common cause with others who are engaged. And I hear the word movements here, moving from the institutional arrangements towards connecting with movements as a way of, mission going into the future is something that we warmly welcome. The IMC itself, has signaled it was an institution that came out of fragmentation and modeled an ecumenical path. And so at this volume, in my understanding, stands as a transition moment to point us to another way in terms of what content are we preoccupying ourselves and what methods are we going to use. And the way, as Kenneth was talking about, the way the people who authored this volume interacted already demonstrates a collaborative methodology of working that we are also seeking to affirm in our work going forward. So I couldn't thank you more for putting these ideas and impetus on the table for us, to pick up on. Thank you very much.
Friends, thank you for your sharing with us here today. We are going to wrap up now, as there's a further process still to go through in a short while. Those of you who are with us in Visitor Hall, it's so good to be with you. Those who have joined us online, our thanks. We wish you well and blessings for all that lies ahead. A reminder that the text is available as a PDF download on the WCC's website for you to find. And please do stay connected with us and the processes that remain. So friends, thank you. Keep safe. Go well.